Dr. Valerie Caron from the CSIRO, thanks for joining us on Flow today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we picked up just monitoring across the Flow News 24 desk this arrival of a series of dung beetles that are coming to help digest the waste out there on the ground, but it's been a lengthy biosecurity process, I understand.
Oh yes, it's very a long process to bring anything new into Australia. We've got the best biosecurity policies in the world, and we follow them as close as we can.
And so the what I remember reading, and you must correct me here, what country they came from. I thought they've come in from Spain, but how long has it taken from leaving the country they came from to getting here in Australia and then being okay for release?
Yeah, it takes a long time. So it's a two-step process. So first of all, we need to get those beetles. There needs to be a big risk assessment happening, and that can take up to a year and a half before we can actually even think about bringing them in the country. And then after that, we need to get the permit. So that takes a long time as well. Those beetles that we have come from Morocco, but they also have a little stopover in France, and then they send to us in Australia. So the process is quite long because we have to follow all the, every regulations that exist. We bring adult beetles in Australia, and then they have to stay in quarantine. And then we just rear them in quarantine, and then we can only take their eggs out that have been sterilized. So the outside of the eggs has been sterilized, and nothing nasty can come to the country. So no virus, nothing, no bacteria, nothing can come with.
So it's a one-way trip for the parents, if you like. It's like a mission to Mars. They're not going back or going anywhere else. It's their eggs that we're after.
Yeah, and it's incredible. To me, it's incredible that it actually works, because how we surface sterilize these eggs, and eggs are very fragile. It's for 15 minutes in a very harsh chemical, and they come to the other side, and we can actually get beetles out of them, which is pretty incredible.
Now, so we can all feel a bit smarter, what's the proper technical name of the specific beetle we're bringing in?
Oh yeah, the scientific name. So we've got three species we're bringing in that we've brought in already. So there's Ontophagus vacca, Ontophagus adelysicus, and then Gymnopleuris sturmii. So two of them are tunnelers, which means they take the dung down in tunnels from the cow pat from the surface, while the other one is a roller. So it makes a little ball and just roll it out.
That's what I was keen to know whether we're getting any rollers or whether they're all burrowers. So we got one that's going to roll the dung around a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and are any of those airborne winged creatures, or they're all ground-based?
No, they do fly. All of them can fly and disperse, but they usually would fly from cow pat to cow pat. So they're not known to fly, hundreds of kilometers. So if we want to move them in the country, it's better to take them and move them to a new place to make it faster.
Yeah, so the introduction of these, naturally cows and sheep are not native species to Australia, so we introduced them a long time ago, but Australia didn't have a species that would break down the dung in the paddocks.
Yeah, you're right. So we've got a really good diversity of dung beetles in Australia. We've got 500 native species, and they're incredible, but they're very adapted to marsupial poop. So they have evolved with animals from Australia.
Well, there you go. I didn't know that. We actually already had quite a number of species, but they're just not used to working with cow and sheep poo.
No, that's it. And especially with cow dung, it's so sloppy compared to marsupial dung. Most species are not interested at all. There's a few species that can use it, but usually not enough to make a difference. So the cow dung just accumulated, and the sheep dung on the surface of the pasture, which is not good for several reasons.
And has one of the drivers for this been about climate change and concerns about emissions that arise around the pat itself, the dung?
The main reason is because we have already imported several species. So since the 1960s, dung beetle species have been introduced from Europe and Africa. However, there's still gaps that exist in the season. So each dung beetle species will be active at a certain time of the year. And then if you look at throughout Australia, there's still some gap geographically that there's no dung beetles for certain seasons. So what we're trying to do is fill those gaps at the moment.
And is that why some of them are coming from a different sort of climatic region? Is that why the gaps exist?
Yeah, so we are trying to target a spring in southern Australia. So that includes obviously WA, South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, and Tasmania. So we're focusing on that kind of spring. gap. And Morocco is fabulous because it's a Mediterranean climate, which really fits with those regions. But also they have a lot of different climates, and they have a lot of dung beetles. And that's incredible. If you go there, it's just crawling with dung beetles everywhere because their farming system still kind of allow dung beetles to really thrive.
Yeah, and so the efforts in this area when it comes to dung beetles, has there been an increased drive behind it because of concerns about climate change and emissions?
Not for that reason specifically, but definitely we are trying to get beetles that can deal with drier conditions as well. So, for instance, Ontophacus vacca, we already introduced a French strain of that species, but now we're targeting Morocco because we believe they'll be better at dealing with drier conditions.
So more so, the references to climate change in this context is about their adapting species that are introduced into Australia because of a changing climate, not as a way of mitigating climate impacts from the livestock industry.
No, but that's something some of my colleagues are going to look into. So because the dung, they're bringing the dung down to the root level, so that if not, the dung would stay on the surface, which is not good for various reasons, like spoiling pasture and for bush fly to breed and all these different things and water pollution. But also, if you bring that dung down to the root level, it does improve nutrient cycling, but there might be some carbon sequestration as well. But that's something that we still need to look into. So the beetles we introduce now, it's not for that reason.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to introduction of these species, and it's been mentioned in the discussion around the studios here about, of course, cane toads and Japanese millipedes and the like. But as you say, we've already been introducing dung beetles for some time in Australia. What's the process that gives people confidence we're not going to end up with them all over us in Australia?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There has to be independent environmental assessment, so that has been done. Dung beetles are really good because they only eat dung, so they can't move to something else. So if you think about the cane toad, it's a generalist. It can eat a lot of different things. Dung beetles only eat dung. So if you know dung, you're safe. So that's already good. And really, they prefer that kind of cow and sheep dung, which is not what native species like. So it's unlikely they will outcompete them. And so far, there hasn't been negative impact from the 23 species that are established. So that's the great thing as well.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting topic. Always we have a bit of a laugh here on the station, whether we're talking about bodily functions, whether it's animals or humans, but it's an important work, and it's certainly going to help not just the environment, but possibly even farms as well, if that dung's getting burrowed underground.
Yeah, absolutely. And, dung beetles have great positive impact. They can help control parasites. Bush flies that just live in dung and thrive in dung, that controls them as well. Less water pollution, better nutrient cycling. So it's all very positive.
Well, Dr. Valerie Caron, thanks for giving us your time talking about that topic, and appreciate your work.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.